it's Father Francis, the Faith Guy, with another drive-by theological reflection. Well, the last couple of reflections, I have to admit, have been a little on the serious side.
Why so serious? Let's put a smile on that face.
In this 24th Sunday, in Ordinary Time, the Prodigal Son Gospel, is to kind of lighten up just a little bit and just have fun with this beautiful reading. Because basically this reading is all about the three-dimensional mercy of God. And I'm going to explain that here in just a moment. One of the things that's really interesting in the last year has been the advent of three-dimensional movies, DVDs, and now TVs. Everybody's into the three-dimensional kick. Now, I have to tell you, three-dimensional movies really came back out, were started in the 1950s, believe it or not. Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D. But what's interesting is that this whole concept of three dimensions is a fun concept. I remember being totally captivated by 3D images on a little thing called a little Viewmaster. I don't know if they have those anymore. Little plastic body with a couple of little, it looked like a little set of binoculars, and then you put a little round disc with the images. And there were stereoscopic images, but when you looked at them in the Viewmaster, they looked three-dimensional. Very captivating, very fascinating. So anyway, today we look at mercy in a 3D mercy. And what do I mean by that? Well, when we look at, hey kitty cat, there's a little kitty cat running around the river road here. When we look at the prodigal son, I think it has a three-dimensional element. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, we all pretty much know the story of the prodigal son, the lost son who comes home. And I think everyone knows, well, basically it's about this young man, and he comes home, and his father, takes him back, so on and so forth. But believe it or not, I think there's more than one prodigal son in this gospel. In fact, there's several, believe it or not, prodigal sons in this gospel. Let me explain. Well, we all know the story of the first prodigal son. The one young, rebellious young guy. You can almost hear, the strains of Frank Sinatra's, song in the background. I did it my way. Here he is, you rebel with a cause, young man with a cause. Give me my share of the inheritance and give it to me now. And because of why? He does not recognize, his father's love for him, basically. He says, give me my inheritance now. And it's a very painful reality because inheritance is only given when somebody dies. So for this young man to say to his father, give me my inheritance, was not only a selfish thing, but it was a slap in the face, adding insult to injury, saying, I really don't recognize you as my father even. So off he goes, and we know the rest of the story. What happens is he squanders the inheritance. Basically, whether it's very simple to say that he probably just led a very extravagant lifestyle, and when he came to the end of his cash flow, that was it. And his time, like our time, was hit by this economic upheaval and insecurity, and although he was lucky to at least get a job, he recognized that, his father, who was still a wealthy man, a man of means, was able to probably give him the same job, but it would have even been better working conditions. And so he decides, I'll just go home and just say, hey, look, I know I can't be your son anymore, but, at least let me, work for you. Well, the real story about the prodigal son, is that he finally recognizes the father. That's what he recognizes. He recognizes that he has a father. And so he goes to the father and he asks for the father's mercy, and instead of, kind of being, scolded and, reprimanded and chastised for his indulgent extravagance and selfishness, the Father basically not only takes him back, but he restores him to a place of honor within the home, within the family of faith. Wow. Now, again, so we know that story, and we love that story. But there's another prodigal son. You know who he is? Figure out who it is? Of course. It is the older son, the dutiful one who has stayed behind and worked hard. He's probably a guy in his early 40s, and he's probably now running the family business, that type of thing. And so when he hears about the younger son coming back, well, and not only coming back, but now being restored in a wonderful celebration that's occurring in his honor, well, this is just way too much for the second son to accept. No way. How dare my father do that? That's just certainly not the way it's done. I mean, this evil, selfish, self-indulgent, self-centered, brat comes home, and instead of giving him a good tongue lashing and maybe, even taking him to the woodshed and, pinning his ears back, pilgrim, basically puts him in a place of honor and celebrates the fact that he's no longer lost but found and he's home safe and sound. Wow. So the father goes out to this second prodigal son, and he basically entreats him and tries to reason with him and talk to him and explain to him that, not only is this a celebration for the son's return, but your brother has returned as well. It's not just my son, but it's your brother. Now, we're never really told whether or not this other brother goes back in. We're never told that. It's left open-ended. I think it's done that way intentionally to help us, those of us who maybe feel identified maybe with this brother. And that's what I want to say next, is that when I was a younger guy, and actually probably more in my late 40s, kind of looking back on my younger years, I probably readily identified with the young rebel guy, the young guy, the rebel with the cause. And but now in my later years, I find myself identifying more with the older brother. Now, when it comes to us as Catholics, I think that maybe we can apply, put another, overlay on this gospel and kind of make it a little bit more close to home. Maybe in some ways we look at, let's say the younger son might be considered more of a free spirit, kind of a progressive, liberal-minded, if you will, free spirit, wants to kick off all the traditions and rules and, discover new things and really live life and not be bound by rules. Whereas the older son, recognizes the importance of rules, and the necessity and the good that they bring, maybe the younger son might be more, like I said, more on the liberal side, where the older son might be a little more conservative, kind of thinking, we need to follow, certainly the teachings of the church and, read all the encyclicals and, know our catechism and, by golly, make sure everybody else does too. And that kind of outlook, that kind of mindset. And there's nothing wrong, really, with the two, perhaps. I mean, in their own places, there's room for both, certainly. The sad thing is, in the church today, I think that we have more division because of it than unity, but maybe someday we'll find a nice, happy medium and we'll all be able to get along. But I think there's, again, a third prodigal son lurking, lurking in the shadows, It's like being a two-dimensional person in a three-dimensional world. And what I mean by that is that although a two-dimensional person can live in a three-dimensional world, they're going to experience that three dimension in a lot different way than say, a regular three-dimensional character would. Basically, they're going to learn about the three dimensions by the shadows that the three-dimensional beings and characters cast. And that's how I think we discover that third prodigal son. And who's the third prodigal son in our gospel? Well, lo and behold, that famous Broadway musical team, it is the Father. What? You say? The Father? Prodigal son? How can that be? Well, again, this is a conjecture on my part. I will be honest with you about that. It's speculation, but I think the text kind of bears it out. And why do I say that? Because this father is able to deal with and relate to both the young man and the older son. And why would he be able to so effectively and tenderly deal with both of these guys if he himself had not been a prodigal, maybe from his own father? And I think that's why I can safely say that I think the third prodigal son is the father. And we see that because of the mercy that he extends to both of his sons. In other words, it's kind of this three-dimensional element comes back. A lot of us, whether we consider ourselves liberal or traditional or progressive or conservative, we all kind of look at how God, we sometimes ask ourselves, in those real tough times of life, where is God's mercy? And, certainly there are lots of, lives of the saints which illustrate how God works in their lives, like St. Augustine and, all the other different saints, St. Lucy and St. Monica, and, all these different beautiful host of saints that we have to look to. But sometimes, we might say, well, maybe, we look to, the teachings of the church to kind of give us a structure of, how we can find God's mercy. And certainly when we stand literally on the shores of mercy, it's almost like encountering this huge ocean. It is overwhelming. It is overpowerful. It's so powerful. But as we look at the mystery of mercy, sometimes we have to also realize, especially in those very difficult, questionable times when people, say, take their own lives, or maybe they died as a result of, say, a drug overdose, or they were maybe chronic alcoholics, or maybe they died in some, really bad, violent death. We have to sometimes scratch our heads and we ask ourselves, well, gee, where is God's mercy there? And again, sometimes we might be, we look towards the church to kind of outline how mercy works, but we also have to allow for that third dimension that sometimes we don't see, that shadow dimension of mercy. In other words, sometimes it doesn't always neatly fit into the prescribed venues that we have, say, from the catechism, or from, say, maybe a special devotion that we might have. Maybe people fall outside those lines. And yet, again, we may not totally see how God's mercy operates in those maybe questionable times. But what we need to know is that the mercy, the shadow of mercy, this infinite loving shadow of mercy, even extends to people, even though we may not understand how that works. We never know a person's last moments in life. We just don't know. And sometimes, at the end of life, people are the senses. They're not able to see, hear, speak. Their senses are removed from them. And sometimes we are not able then to know whether or not that they were able to call out to God in their final moments. But we do know that if a person truly longs for God and calls out to God, even with our last breath of life, we believe that God extends His mercy to that soul and to that individual. So, as we look at the prodigal son, the beautiful story is that, in many, many ways, we're all prodigals in one form or another. And the beautiful message is we are all called to come home to the family and the household of faith. Well, this has been Father Francis with another drive-by theological reflection. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. And until next week, keep on keeping on.